Hi folks, this is Nat, and this is going to be a video lesson on scanning a text and identifying important information to help us solve a problem. This is a super important skill to have because unlike in, say, math class sometimes, where the information that you need to answer a problem is all given to you and really easy to spot, a lot of the time in real life, the information kind of hides from us. And one of the places you might get that information is from a larger text or reading that you're doing. Here's an example that we're going to be working with during this lesson. I'll read it to you and you can read along. It says, the IUCN lists the polar bear as a vulnerable species, citing sea ice losses from climate change as the single biggest threat to the polar bear's survival. Polar bears rely on sea ice to hunt, travel, breed, and sometimes to den. At their 2014 meeting, the IUCN Polar Bear Specialist Group reported that of the 19 populations of polar bears, 3 are declining, 6 are stable, 1 is increasing, 9 have insufficient data to be determined. What percentage of the polar bear populations are declining? Well, if we think about this, there's a lot of information in it, but most of it is actually not useful to us in terms of our purpose. And so we kind of have to think, what information here do I need? What's the important stuff? And that gets us to our big question for this lesson. How do I determine importance? So if I'm trying to solve this polar bear question, how do I determine what information is important to me and what information doesn't matter? And the answer here is that what's important is going to depend, and it's going to depend really specifically on the purpose. And what that means is that depending on the purpose that I have, the goal that I have, different information or different things might be important to me. And this is true not just in math, but everywhere. In the context of my polar bear question, however, my purpose is going to be determined by the question that I'm trying to answer. So if we come back to this big paragraph, and this is true generally speaking when you look at any sort of math problem, no matter how long it is, the most important thing, and the thing that's going to determine my purpose and everything else that's important to me, is typically going to be the question. And unlike, say, an English class where the topic sentence is often at the beginning of the paragraph and tells us, well, this is the most important thing or the big idea. In math class, the important thing, the question, is often at the very end, and that's true in this case. It says, what percentage of the polar bear populations are declining? And it's this question that's going to help me determine what's important. This question is going to give me my goal. My goal is going to be to calculate the percentage of polar bear populations that are declining. And that gets us back again to this idea of how do we determine importance. Once we have a purpose or a goal in mind, importance is going to be, well, what information is applicable to my goal? Or alternatively, we might think about it as important information is the stuff or the data that we need to answer our question. So thinking about our question, our goal, what percentage of the populations are declining, well, we have to kind of access the information we already know about some of the stuff in here. I see that this question has to do with percents, and that's really important. I'm saying what percent, so presumably I don't know the percent that I'm looking for. That might help me get started. I'm going to say, well, X is the percent that I need out of 100, and since I don't know it, X is the right thing there maybe. And then to actually calculate this percent, I'm going to need 2 pieces of information. I'm going to need to know how many polar bear populations are declining. And since a percent is out of a whole, I'm going to need to know the total number of populations. So, based on the goal that I've set for myself, these are now the important bits of information, the information I need to be looking for. With that in mind, I'm probably going to go back and reread my paragraph so that I can read more specifically, searching for these specific bits of data. So the IUCN lists the polar bear as a vulnerable species, citing sea ice losses from climate change as the single biggest threat to polar bear survival. Polar bears rely on the sea ice to hunt, travel, breed, and sometimes to den. At their 2014 meeting, the IUCN Polar Bear Specialist Group reported that of the 19 populations of polar bears, hold on a second. Now that I know what I'm looking for, that actually sounds important to me. I know that I'm looking for the total number of populations, and it sounds like there are 19 populations of polar bears. That sounds like a total to me. So I'm going to think that maybe that's the important information I need, or at least one of the bits. If I move on, I might say, okay, 3 are declining. Oh, hey, there's my next thing right there. I may not even need to finish reading this, but that is, again, a really important bit of information. 3 are declining. So I have 19 total populations, and 3 are declining. So I can finish solving this equation by putting that information in. 3 declining populations, 19 total populations, and I'm ready to go. I know how to solve a proportion, so I can do this. 3 times 100 is 300, 19 times x is 19 x's, and those are equal. I'm going to divide both by 19, and I'm going to use a calculator so I don't waste my time. But I'm going to learn then that about 16% of my polar bear populations are in decline. So a few things that you're going to note, or hopefully note, about the way that we approach that problem is, first off, I didn't jump right into solving it. Sometimes the tendency is the first time you see a number, you just kind of write it down and you try to start without knowing necessarily what you're doing. As we saw in this example, a lot of the times we can't even tell what we're trying to do until we get to the end. So it's important to sort of skim or read the problem before you even start. The second thing you saw me do was really think hard about what this question meant. Think about my background knowledge of percentages so that I could kind of get myself started. And I used that background knowledge about percentages to figure out, well, what information do I need in order to answer the question? Then, once I had my purpose, I went back through and scanned quickly for the information that I needed or that I'd figured out that I needed. And as in this problem, as in real life, that's going to be really important for you to be able to do, because we're oftentimes presented with a lot more information than we need. So telling what the important stuff is versus what isn't as important is going to be really important to us. So here's a chance for you to practice this. This is actually the exact same paragraph with 2 separate questions at the bottom. So think about what we talked about, identify what information you're going to need to solve each of those problems, find it, and then give it a go. Good luck.